Hey guys, Christine here. Today we're making a data entry form in Google Sheets. If you haven't watched my first video, that's okay. You should still be able to learn everything you need to know to make a data entry form in Google Sheets using HTML and app scripts. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's get started by adding a button to our spreadsheet that will open the recipe entry form. In your Recipe View tab, go up to the top menu and click Insert. From the drop-down, select Drawing. A window will pop up with a checkered background. That means we're in the drawing interface. In the drawing window, click the Shapes icon. It should look like a small circle overlapping a square. This opens a list of shape options. Let's choose Shape and then select Rectangle. Now your cursor becomes a crosshair. Click and drag anywhere on the canvas to draw your rectangle. This is going to be your button. Once you draw the shape, look at the top toolbar. You'll see options for fill color, border color, and font. Click into the rectangle and type the text, Add Recipe. You can change the font and size by clicking the three-dot icon at the far right of the toolbar. This will reveal additional font options. Once your button looks the way you like, click Save and Close on the top right corner. You should now see your button floating over your sheet. You can click and drag to move it, or you can resize it by dragging the blue squares on its corners. Right now it looks like a button, but it doesn't really do anything yet, so let's give it some functionality. We need to make a form that pops up when the button is clicked. That means we need to write some code. In the top menu of the spreadsheet, click on Extensions, and then choose App Script. A new tab will open, and this is where we'll write the code that connects to our spreadsheet. You'll see that there's already a file open named code.js. We'll come back to this file in a moment. First, we need to create a new file for our HTML form. On the left-hand panel, click the plus icon and choose HTML. You'll see a new file appear with a blue border around the name, and that means you can rename it. Rename the file to something clear and descriptive. I'm calling mine New Recipe Form, and then press Enter to save the name. Inside of the HTML, you'll see some basic structure already in place. Between the two body tags, let's type Hello World. This is just a placeholder so we can test if the file loads. Click the Save icon at the top. Great, now we're ready to write a function that will open up this HTML file as a pop-up. Go back into your code.js file. Go ahead and delete the current function. We're going to make our own. Let's start by declaring a function, and we'll name it Open Entry Form. So type out const open entry form equal sign, opening parenthesis, closing parentheses, an equal sign with a greater than sign to create an arrow, followed by a pair of curly braces. This is an arrow function. We're saying that whenever this function is called, we want to do something. Now press Enter, and inside of the curly braces, we'll write the code to actually show the form. First, we need to grab our HTML file. Let's create a variable and call it entry form. Let's type const entry form equals. So now we're going to use a built-in class called HTML service to load our file. On the same line, continue typing HTML service dot create HTML output from file, parentheses, quote, new recipe form, quote, in parentheses. We're using the method create HTML output from file and passing it in the file name as the string. This tells Google Apps Scripts, go get that file and prepare it to be shown. Now we actually need to show the form to the user. Below that line, press Enter and type spreadsheet app dot get UI parentheses dot show modal dialog parentheses entry form comma quote enter new recipe. This tells the spreadsheet to open a dialog box using entry form we just prepared. The second part, enter new recipe, is the title that appears at the top of the pop-up. Click the save icon. We now have the code to open the form, so let's connect it to our button. Go back into your spreadsheet and right-click the Add Recipe button and click the three-dot icon. Choose Assign Script. In the dialog box that appears, type Open Entry Form, then click OK. Now refresh the spreadsheet and click the button. You might get an authorization alert. Click through to allow authorization. After authorization is allowed, the pop-up will pop up with Hello World inside of it. Success! Now let's make this form more useful. Right now our form is very plain. Let's fix that by adding some automatic styling. We're going to use a free minimal CSS framework called water.css. It applies a simple, clean styling to your form without needing to write any extra CSS. To get started, let's Google water.css, and you should see the option pretty high up. And we'll go to that website. Scroll down to the options section. You'll see a few choices for light, dark, or auto themes. I'm going with the light only version, but you can choose whichever one you prefer. Now we need to copy the link tag it gives us. Let's go back into our new recipeform.html file. Paste that link tag right between the head tags near the top of the file. This line of code will automatically pull in the water.css styles every time your form opens. Click Save and let's go test it. Open up your spreadsheet and refresh the page. Click the Add Recipe button again. You should now see that Hello World message uses a more modern font. Awesome, now we can move on to building out the actual form inputs. Let's start by creating the inputs that will collect the recipe data. We'll begin with the form tag itself. Inside of your HTML file, replace Hello World with an opening form tag and give it the ID attribute equal to recipe form in quotes. We're giving this form an ID of recipe form so that we can easily reference it later in JavaScript. Alright, now let's add the input for our recipe name. Let's start by creating an input tag. Give it a type attribute equal to text in quotes, a name attribute equal to quotes name, and a placeholder attribute equal to name in quotes. Here we're creating a text input. The name equals name in quotes part is important. That's the label app scripts we'll use when we grab the form data, and it will be very important later in this tutorial. Next up is the image link field. This will let us store a link to a recipe photo. Let's copy the previous input line and update it like this. Change the name attribute to be equal to image in quotes, and then change the placeholder text from name to image link. Then we'll add a ratings field. This one is a number input, so it needs a different type. Let's copy and paste an input from before, change the type attribute to number in quotes, change the name attribute to be rating in quotes, and we're also going to give it a min attribute equal to 0 in quotes, and a max attribute equal to 5 in quotes. The min and max sets it to accept numbers between 0 and 5. Alright, and then replace the placeholder text with rating. Next is the instructions field. Since this can be a long paragraph, we'll use text area instead of the single line input. So let's type out an H4 tag for the header. We'll give it the text of instructions and then type the closing H4 tag. Below that, let's type out the text area tag, give it a name attribute equal to instructions, and then we can type the closing text area tag. Now we add our nutritional information. Let's add some H4 tags for title for this section with the text area of nutritional information. Let's copy the input line from the recipe name so we can edit it and make adding all of these nutritional inputs a lot faster. This part is very repetitive, so I'll be speeding the recording up here. Be sure to pause the video if you need more time. Finally, let's add the submit button so the user can send the data to the spreadsheet. At the bottom of the form, add a button tag with the type equal to submit in quotes, give it the text Add Recipe, and then type the closing button tag. And then be sure to close out the form with a closing form tag. Let's save the file. Now our form has some structure. Alright, so now we need to make this form do something when it's submitted. Inside of your HTML form, scroll down and add a script tag just below the closing of the form tag, but still inside of the body tag. We're going to add a listener that watches for when someone submits the form. We need to grab the form using its ID. So let's type out document.getElementById, parentheses, quote, recipe form. This tells the browser, find the element with the ID recipe form. Now let's listen for the submit event. Go ahead and add .addEventListener, parentheses, inside of quotes, submit, comma, E with the parentheses around it, the arrow, and some curly braces. Here we're saying when this form is submitted, run the function we're about to define. Inside of the empty parentheses, we have an E, which stands for event. That gives us access to all of the details of what just happened. Now we'll grab all of the data from the form and store it in a variable. On the next line, let's type const form data equals new form data, but with a capital F and a capital D, parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, e.target. E.target points to the form that triggered the submit. We want to convert that form data into a regular object that we can do things with. So to do this, we need to type const recipe equals object with a big O dot from entries, parentheses, form data dot entries, parentheses. Next, let's send that object to our app scripts backend. So type google.script.run.add_recipe, parentheses, recipe. This line tells AppScript, run the function named addRecipe and give it this data. Finally, let's clear out the form after the submission. So type e.target.reset, parentheses. Awesome. Now when our user submits the form, the data is ready to be sent to the spreadsheet. Next up, let's build the addRecipe function on the backend to receive the data and write it to the sheet. Open your code.js file and then type const addRecipe equals parentheses recipe arrow curly braces. This function will run when our HTML form sends in the data. We need to get access to the spreadsheet. On the next line, let's type out const sheet equals spreadsheet app dot get active spreadsheet, parentheses, dot get sheet by name, parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, put quotes testing. We need to go to our spreadsheet and create the testing sheet. At the bottom of your sheets, click the plus icon and add a new sheet and call it testing. Now let's write the data to the sheet. We'll convert the recipe object into a list of values or an array. So let's type out sheet.append row, parentheses, object with a big O, dot values, parentheses, recipe. This takes just the values from the object, not the keys, and adds them as a new row. And click Save. Let's go to our testing tab and add a button to open the recipe form to make testing easier for us. So go to the top and insert a drawing, and then draw a shape, and then insert it. After you've inserted your object, right-click it to see the three-dot icon appear so we can add a script. In the Add Script modal, let's type Open Entry Form and save. Click the New button to open the form. Fill out the form with random data. This is just going to be for testing, so whatever you place doesn't really matter. After you have some test data on the form, click Submit and wait a few moments to see if it works. You should see a new row appear with all of your data. Now let's make sure the data we send to the spreadsheet shows up in the correct order. Right now, when we use object.values recipe, we're just getting the data in whatever order the browser decides to give it to us, and that might not match the order of our spreadsheet columns, and we want to control that. So let's go into our code.js file, and inside of the add recipes function, we're going to start by creating a new variable. We're going to call this variable order because it will define the order of the fields we want. So let's go ahead and type const order equals square brackets. This line is saying we're making a new constant named order, and it's going to be an array, which is just a list of things. Now, what are we going to put in that list? Well, we're going to type the names of the fields from our HTML form in the exact same order as the columns in our spreadsheet. Each one needs to match the name attribute from your HTML input tags, and each one should be in quotation marks, separated by commas. For example, if your form has fields for name, image, rating, tag, meal, protein, type, blah, 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 your array might look like this. Const order equals name in quotes, image in quotes, rating in quotes, and so on. For now, we're going to skip the tags because they're a little bit more complicated to incorporate, but we will visit them later. Let's just make sure everything else is in the correct order though. Pause here and go copy those field names from your HTML form and paste them into the array in the order that matches your spreadsheet. Once you've finished building your order array, we're going to use it to build a new row with all the values in the right order. To do that, let's declare a new variable to hold the row data. So type out const row equals square brackets. Now we're creating another array. It's empty for now, but we'll fill it using a loop. So let's start looping through that ordered list. We're going to use a method called forEach, which goes through each item in the array one by one. So type out order.forEach, parentheses I, arrow, curly braces. Let's break down what we're doing here. Order.forEach means go through each item in the order array. Inside of the parentheses, we're using an arrow function, and that's the part that says I with the arrow and curly braces. Now inside of the curly braces, we want to get the value for the field from the recipe object and add it to our row. So type out row.push, parentheses, recipe, square bracket, I. This line says, go look up the value in the recipes object using the name I and push it or add it to the row array. Finally, let's go down the line where we appended the row to the sheet. Originally, we were using sheet.appendRow object.values recipe. Let's go ahead and delete object.value recipe and replace it with row. That tells the spreadsheet add this row values in the exact order we just built. Now hit save and give it a test. To make sure the order is right, let's go and take the headers from the recipes and place them in the testing sheet. Be sure to do a paste special and values only so that the table itself doesn't copy and you only have the text values. Let's open up that form, fill it out with some random data. It doesn't have to be anything special. And then after we have some data on that form, click Submit. Now let's take a look at the testing tab to see if the order is correct. Remember, it might take a second. AppScripts isn't always instant, but once it runs, your data should show up in the exact column order that you wanted. The values will be off for nutritional information, and that's okay because we're not doing our dropdowns yet. And again, we'll get to that later. But otherwise, it looks really good. When you submit a recipe that includes an image link, right now that link shows up in the spreadsheet as plain text, just the URL. But we want it to be the image inserted into the cell, like when we enter our data into our actual table. So let's go ahead and fix that. There's something key to note in order to do this. In Google Sheets, you can actually use a formula called image to display an image right into a cell. Let's try it manually for a moment. Go into your testing spreadsheet and click on an empty cell. Now type =image, parentheses, quote, your link. Make sure that the link you put is in quotation marks. If the link is valid, you'll get a warning asking permission to load external data. Click Allow and the image will show up, just like if you inserted it manually. Let's go into our code.js file and modify the part where we're building the row. Scroll down to the section where we loop through the order array. You should see this, order.forEach, parentheses I, arrow function, row.push, recipe at I. Right now, that's pushing each field into the row, including the image link, just as it was typed into the form. But we want to treat the image field differently. So let's split the logic using an if statement. Above row.push, let's type if parentheses I triple equals image in quotes, curly braces. We're checking, is this current field we're on equal to image? The 3 equal signs means we're doing a strict comparison, making sure the value and the types match exactly. Now, inside of the curly braces, let's build our image formula. On the next line, let's grab the link the user submitted. So let's type const link equals recipe square brackets I. Now let's turn that into a Google Sheets formula string. We're going to use string interpolation. That's a fancy term that means putting a variable into a string. And here's how we do that. Type const formula equals backtick equals image parentheses quotes $, curly braces, link. It's very important that we're using backticks initially. The slanted quote, usually found above the tab key on your keyboard. Those backticks are what they're telling the computer that this is going to be string interpolation. Inside of those backticks, we write the formula like we would in the cell, equals image parentheses blah blah blah. And inside the parentheses, we put our link inside quotes again. Then we use the $, curly braces to insert an actual value from a variable. Now that we've built the formula, we can push it into our row. On the next line, let's type row.push parentheses formula. Finally, we want to make sure we don't push the plain link too. So we'll wrap the rest of the logic in an else block. Right after the closing brace of the if statement, let's type else curly brackets row.push parentheses recipes square brackets I. Now when the field is image, it builds and inserts an image formula. Otherwise, it works the same as it did before. Let's save our script and give it a try. Fill out your form, including the image link. And then hit submit. Then take a look at your spreadsheet. If it all went well, you should see an actual image in the image column instead of just the link. Beautiful. Well, there we have it, a basic data entry form. In our next video, we're going to work on dropdowns that will populate from the sheet for our tags. If you found this content helpful, please like and subscribe. It would really help this channel grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.